what I ended up doing was I put this together and I checked the squish, and the squish without a gasket was almost 30 thousandths of an inch. They say 20 thousandths is the tightest you want to go, and without the gasket, you know, it was maybe 27 thousandths of an inch, and that's pretty good. And I was going to just delete the gasket and use this liquid, it's the Yamabond 4 liquid gasket maker, and I tried that, and I did a pressure test on it, and it leaked air right at the seam. I don't know if you can see that, but there's the seam right here, and it leaked right there. And you know, without the gasket, everything has to be really flush, and between the crankcase and the cylinder, they've been beat up quite a bit. So what I did was I put this is a thin gasket material. It's only 0.2 millimeters, or probably like 8 thousandths of an inch thick, where the OEM specifications are 20 thousandths of an inch, or 0.5 millimeter. That's what the normal gasket would be. The normal gasket would take it to, I guess, that would make it, so if it's 0.20 thousandths, that'd be about 50 thousandths, which isn't bad. I mean, but I'm trying to get it as tight as I can, hoping it has enough compression to start. And I just put Yamabond on the base of the cylinder, pressed it down, and let it sit and dry. And this is what I'm doing. I'm just going to cut it out here. I just wanted to show that. That way I can buy whatever gasket material I want and how thick I want it, and kind of go, you know, give it what it needs. So I'm going as thin as I can because I want more compression if I can get it. Sometimes it doesn't make that big of a difference, but I've had a saw once that I always had 130 pounds for compression, and I took the cylinder gasket out and it went up to like 165, and I used it for a couple months and then it blew up. And I think that's because it was the first time I'd ever done that, and I didn't, when I put the gasket material on, I just used stuff similar to the Yamabond 4. I didn't let it dry, I just put it on and put the cylinder on and then let it dry after it installed, and I think it made an air leak. And that was before I ever rebuilt the saw, and that's kind of when I started rebuilding saws, and I blew up my first 056 Super, and it was running great. And it probably, because it was probably running a little extra strong because it had that little extra air coming in. It was running a little lean maybe. It just caught a piston ring and destroyed the cylinder basically, and piston. But that's what I do there, and I'll just cut it out, cut out the bolt holes. That's it. Okay, here's the finished cylinder gasket. I just cut it all out, cut the holes out, you know, cut around there. You can see I still have my plate on. That's so I can pressure test it and vacuum test it. And of course I had to install this because for this model you kind of have to have a gas tank on, and I just put a piece of rubber between the carburetor and the intake manifold, and that plugs up that part. And of course I have a clamp on there to hold pressure and vacuum, and that's that. And, you know, this is a 056 Magnum cylinder, and this is the one that's all scored up, so hopefully it won't leak this time. But I'm going to put it together and pressure test it and vacuum test. If it passes the pressure test, I'll give it a vacuum test. A vacuum should be good if the pressure is good. I got new oil seals in it. I also finished this up. I put it together and put a little gas in it. I didn't fill it all the way up because gas would leak out that hole for the fuel line there. But I'll probably just put another piece of tin under there I'll put JB Weld on the bottom of the tin and press it on and have it kind of a semi-permanent. This gas tank is also kind of a junk one because here's the anti-vibe mount, and used to be a spot right there where it screwed in. That's broke off. This was another one I bought on eBay. It was kind of cheap, and I bought it, and it was I got it, and I went to put the mount on. It was broke, and told the seller, and he gave me my money back, and I never sent it back. I don't know if he wanted it or not, but he didn't say so. Usually I ask, and some things like this, most people wouldn't use that. I wouldn't use it other than for an experiment. But let's say, I mean, it had a hole in the bottom and a broken piece, so it's really not of much value. Even the screw, like I put that 4mm screw in there, and I got that spring off a old fishing reel. You know, I just like took a reel and I was looking for a spring to hold that in place, and that's what I did to that. And another little modification that I do to this particular model is, so that's not the original impulse line. Like the original, let's see if I can find it. The originals look like this, and I don't like them because they're kind of hard to install, and I put a rubber grommet in there, but this you push that through that hole, and you have to reach in there and plug it into the fitting, and what happens is this part, it's so thick that when it gets old and it gets gas through it for a while, they only fit onto the carburetor fitting just a little bit after a while. And I mean, you get a new one, they fit tight, and you can slide them all the way in, but after a while they kind of slip back a little bit and they don't connect well, and that can cause an air leak and score your piston. So I just put good, you have to use good line because the heat from the crankcase will affect that line. Like I use that yellow Tygon line for a bit, and you don't want to use that where there's heat. It just, like, I could just pull it off easily with my thing. I'm lucky I didn't blow us off with that. But I learned that lesson. But just, this is some good, I think this was like OEM Husqvarna line. I think that's pretty good. I've also used Viton. I don't know what Viton uses. Viton fuel line. It's supposedly a little more heat resistant and ethanol resistant. But these, you can cut them as long as you want. It's cheap to buy a roll of them. Those things cost a little bit of money, especially if you buy a original steel one. They cost a bit for what they are. And these, you just slide them all the way in. And I usually make them a little longer, so if they do get loose, I just cut a piece off and shove it in. And that's what that is. And just put a grommet on there, slide it through that grommet. It works pretty good. I always, whenever I get a saw with one of these, I take it off and get rid of it and throw it in a little box I have there. Okay, I got the cylinder back on, and this time I pressure tested it, and I timed, I put my timer on for 5 minutes. Didn't leak a bit. I put it up to 7 on the dial, and it's 5 minutes later, it's still on 7. Now it's doing the vacuum, and I put it on 7. It's staying so far. I'm pretty sure, as of now, it's holding air pressure. Just a little bit, the 7, whatever they call it, forward, backward there. But you know, so it has the repair on the crankcase halves with JB Weld. I just gooped JB Weld on it, let it dry, and I filed it flat, you know, and made my own gasket, put it together. That's holding air right now. I haven't tested the gas tank other than putting gas in it, but you can test them. I'm not going to bother unless it leaks. New oil seals. The cylinder gasket is now holding pressure because it's got the I guess the 0.2 millimeter gasket material is enough to whatever was out of spec, you know, wasn't completely flat for just plain liquid gasket maker. So that little bit of that 2.2 millimeter gasket filled in the gaps. So it's looking good. Doesn't mean it'll stay that way. If I get this to run and it, you know, blows up or whatever, if it, you know, seizes up, then what I'll do is take it apart down to where it is now and pressure and vacuum test it, or well, probably mainly pressure test it. If it passes a pressure test, then I'd vacuum test it. There's 5 minutes. So it still hasn't moved any at all. But what I'll do if it fails, you know, if it seizes up, is I might be able to find a leak. If it failed because of a leak, there's a good chance I could find where that leak was, because you can, you know, see if there is a leak. You know, you can kind of tell sometimes. Sometimes you can't tell. You know, it's hard to tell, but what happened. But you know, if there's a hole in the intake boot, you know, you inspect that and oh, there's a hole in the boot. That's what happened. Or one time, the first time I used the liquid gasket maker, I could see that. I mean, I tested it and there's a leak there. I could tell, but you know, if I put pressure on it and it's losing air, I can look through the bar oil hole and look in there with a flashlight and maybe spray some soapy water up in there and see bubbles coming out. You know, just find it. And oil seals, they're brand new, so they're probably gonna be good. But that's how I go about that. I don't just slap together junk parts and say, hey, this is an experiment. There's, you know, it has to meet, you know, the specifications. You know, in order for, you know, it's engineered to have these specifications, otherwise it's going to break, whether it's a good saw or, you know, whether it's new parts or not. And then as far as air leaks, you know, you really don't, I personally don't like any air leak at all. I've heard people say you can have so much, like Steel says, tells their technicians they can have like a certain amount of air leak is okay. And it's probably true. But it's not okay for me. I'm milling lumber with these. I'm not going to allow any air leak. It's just, you know, air a little bit leaks in, and a year later it's probably going to be a little bit more. You know, I don't believe in that theory. I make them tight so they don't leak at all. And I've had them leak just a tiny, like in 10 minutes leak like one number on the dial. And out of the crankcase, I had one leak once, right up here, not where the cylinder gasket was, like right up in here. And I fixed it. I split the whole case and redid it. You know, I wasn't gonna let that go. You know, and it wasn't a bad leak. I probably could have, if it were a Steel technician, I guess they would have let it go. But I don't. You know, milling lumber is, I think it's a little bit harder on a saw. Except usually it's done less frequently than a professional would use a saw every day. But milling, you're using it, you know, you're wide open for, you know, I don't hold it wide open through the whole cut. I hold it wide open, stop, put a stick in between the board and the log. And that gives it a little bit of break just to, you know, keep the temperature. I think it keeps the temperature from maxing out too much, and then it's just a few seconds, but just that little bit of break, you know. But it's, you know, wide open, you know, for a long time, and cut after cut, your saw is going to get hot, and, you know, when they get hot, those air leaks could, you know, that could mean a lot more, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter, but that's just, I just try to do the best I can. But that's this together, it's holding good, and I just, here's my little setup here. I bought this Mighty Vac off eBay. It was used for 40 bucks. It didn't hold pressure when I bought it, and vacuum. I bought new, you can still buy new, so this is an older one. You can still buy new rebuild kits for it, and I did that. It used to have a quick release here to release the pressure. It leaked, and I couldn't, even with a new kit, I couldn't get it to quit leaking, so I just took it off and plugged it all up. Didn't really need it. And then one thing I found is I'd always get leaks, you know, and it was hard to test a chainsaw because my gauge, I'd have to identify where the leak was coming from, and it was, sometimes it was coming from this, and I just realized that when I do a vacuum test, if I wasn't paying attention to where this was, you know, like sometimes it'd get debris in it and suck in, you know, if you do one of them, it'll actually draw air in, and it was getting really tiny particles of debris were getting into the little seals, you know, like there's one flap of rubber that seals it, and I'd look in there and there'd just be little specks of dust. So that's all you have to do with these is clean them once in a while, you know, especially if you're, like I didn't clean it before this. If it leaked, the first thing I would have done was gone back and cleaned this and then tried it again before I messed with this. First time it leaked, I found it. It wouldn't even hold for, you know, half a minute. It would just all leak out, and it was where I showed you before that, where the cylinder gasket was, and so, but if it's leaking and I can't find it, I mean, like when I told you I had a, you know, in 10 minutes it just leaked down like one number. You can, even a small leak like that, you use soapy water, you can find it. It'll bubble up, even if it's a tiny leak. And if you can't find it, then it's a good chance it's you need to take it apart. It's easy. They're easy to take apart. There's nothing, you know, really complicated about them. That you can easily take it apart and put it back together and know where everything goes. Just don't, you know, drop a screw or something, because they're, you know, they're small screws and use them. But that's that. Yeah. But now next thing I'm gonna do is the ignition. I'll talk a little about the ignition on these in case you're interested.